When we returned home from our honeymoon, we went into our apartment downtown Rexburg near College Avenue, and we loved it there. It was just a wonderful place to start our marriage together, and small as it was plenty adequate, and close to school and easy for me to go to school. And so that turned out to be a nice place to go. Our rent was only around $52, I think, per month at that time, and I was working part time with Jim Hamilton, as I had mentioned. And so I was in a situation that I had previously decided to go into art, and I might mention that Oliver Parson had so much to do with that, because when I went in to register in the first semester at Rick's College, he, being A for art, was right up front and motioned me over, and because I must have had a confused look on my face as to what to do. And so he invited me over to his table and said, "Would you like to major in art?" Well, I had an affinity and love for art, even though I knew nothing about it. And I said, well, yeah, that'd be neat. And so I didn't go into agriculture like I'd been working with chickens for so many years. I thought that was an avenue that was natural and would be something for me to go into for a profession. That would have been a bad choice. And so once I said yes, never looked back in all the years that we've been married. Never ever looked back and lamented or felt bad about choosing art, because it was so exciting and I knew that I could do something in art. And so I started right off with all of the art classes that I could take. And Oliver taught everything. He was the only teacher. I mean, from jewelry making to drawing to painting to ceramics, all of those things he taught, almost in one day at a time. And so it's almost impossible to fathom how many things that he had to cover in art classes for his students. And so we started out with Beth not having to work. She stayed in the apartment and kept it cozy and nice. And I went to school and attended my classes. And so that's where our first year started, and how it was spent. And so we had a lot of fun together. And one of the things that I remember about that period of time is we didn't have any money and no scholarships available. There was nothing of help to help us school-wise. And so, being right downtown, we'd go walk around the blocks downtown and look in the windows and just enjoy window dressing, and that was fun. Look back on it, it didn't cost us a penny, but we could dream. We could dream. What could you add to that?
Well, we lived in that apartment for what, 6 months?
About 6 months.
And then because of money, we had to move to live with Mama Bird for, how long did we stay? Not too long.
Not very long, because I got a job in Utah at that sugar factory.
Mm-hmm. But it was enjoyable there too. She was such a gracious host. But it was during that time too that the big earthquake that happened in Yellowstone Park, I think it was 6.8, I think. And our bed we could not figure out what was happening, but the bed, it was so eerie, the bed started moving back and forth, and it was scary.
Almost dumped me off the bed.
Yeah. Anyway, too, I wanted to interject here. about during our courtship. I was a junior, I believe, or going to be a junior, and that's when my mom passed away. In what year was it? I can't even remember.
1956. She died.
Did she?
Yeah.
Anyway, and then also the other siblings that are gone right now. This doesn't have anything to do with schooling or anything like that, but I just wanted to get it in. Mama died. Then Grandpa and Grandma Clark, and then of course Grandma Whittison. We were able to get a picture of Mike in her arms. That she was probably about 83, and anyway, and then Mama died of cancer, and then my sister Brenda, she passed away at 38, and she had 6 little kids with cancer. And then also my brother Glenn, of course, just passed away. What, maybe a couple of months ago?
Yeah, just been a couple of months ago.
And then of course, like we brought up before, Ruth passed away when she was 14. Yeah. But anyway, talking about cancer. So anyway, I just wanted to interject that part because we'd kind of missed finishing up on that. So anyway, but we had a great time, didn't we?
We did. And after that, staying with my mom, Beth and I decided to go down and take a trailer full of our stuff, what we had, to San Jose State and in California, near San Francisco. And so we proceeded to go over there, and a friend of mine, Del Taylor, that I became friends with at Rick's College, encouraged us to go there because he was there and working, and I can't remember if he was going to school or not. But anyway, he enticed us to come to San Jose to check it out, to go to school there. When we got there, we just didn't have a good feeling about it. And so we just turned around and came back with our trailer to Utah. And so Ray and LaRue, living in Clearfield, allowed us to kind of stay with them, didn't they? Mm-hmm. And we stayed with them for a while we found an apartment there in Clearfield to live. And so that was another dwelling with a family, with Ray and LaRue, and at the time they seemed to be very, very gracious about that and allowed us to do so. And so we got close to their family during that period of time, didn't we?
Yes.
With their children, and it was a nice experience as I look back on that. Well, as I've mentioned too, on the educational line, that I was pursuing all this time, from attempting to go to San Jose State and backing off of that, and I thought, well, now what do I do? And so I had to work. We didn't have money to register and money to go to school, so I applied for a job at the sugar factory there in Layton, Utah, and it was a situation for all-night work, and I got on, and so for 3 or 4 months through the winter, had the opportunity to work at the sugar factory there, and I look back on that as not easy to work all night like that. I'd never trained myself to do that, but I survived it, and it was a good experience. And from that situation, I started, after finishing that job, I got on at the Clearfield Naval Depot Center, kind of a naval base supply house. It a huge complexes, and so I was able to get a job doing correction of nautical and aeronautical charts, and my title was
Cardio.
cartographic aid. And so worked for the Navy for 2 years, and at the same time was able to take night classes at Weber State, which at that time was a 2-year school. And Farrell Young was a teacher there, and Groberg, I can't remember his first name, but two wonderful teachers that had good rapport with them, and they were good teachers and very supportive and encouraging. They just kept encouraging me, and so it was wonderful to go to school there at Weber State and get to know those fellows, and so working at the naval base, Beth again was at home and enjoying being a housewife, and we lived in a little chicken coop type place for how long, Beth?
I can't remember. I don't know.
We
But
were
they
there
had
for a good
fixed
year,
it up.
year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was a nice little chicken coop.
yeah. And I befriended a really wonderful lady. What's her first name? Salisbury.
Ah, yes.
Paul, and anyway, he was kind of a weird guy. But anyway, Sister Salisbury was such a friend. Sister Salisbury was such a friend, and she offered her downstairs and kind of an appendage to the house for us to live in, free. Well, I had decided at that time, we decided to go to Utah State and get my bachelor's there at Utah State.
Traveling
Back and forth from South Ogden area, Riverdale, at their home. And I agreed to fix up their apartment, their home under the home. And so I spent quite a lot of time fixing things in that apartment. And it wasn't comfortable for Beth to be there. That Paul Salisbury, he was a little fresh, and
what
why don't you
happened?
tell us?
What happened is, he, of course, he could listen to me when we had Mike. He could listen. He'd go down his stairs and sit there and listen to me talk to Mike. Anyway, but he was, I don't know exactly what was his problem. Do you, Dick?
I don't.
But anyway,
Physically, mentally.
yeah, mentally and physically, I don't
He
know.
seemed sharp, intelligent, but on the other hand,
not
it
quite.
was lacking.
Yeah. Anyway, of course, this one morning, he came down and he knocked on the door, and I opened it up, and we chatted a little bit, and then he kissed me right on the lips. I was really upset. That was not very nice. And of course, I told Dick, and Dick told Afton. That's her
Afton.
name. And of course, it did never happen again. But he was nice. But anyway,
Yeah.
kind of weird.
So Mom survived that little exercise, and it turned out to be a pretty good thing. We had a 1955 Oldsmobile at that time that I used to go back and forth to Utah State, and so that became quite an ordeal.
But you got in a carpool, didn't you?
Yeah, and so I got
Or
into
did you?
no.
No,
Most of the time I had to drive,
that's right.
but there was occasionally someone I could drive with, but generally I was on my own, because when you're going to college, you just can't set up a schedule like that very well. And so I re-look back on that, and it probably was a mistake, because it would have been a lot better off had lived right near Utah State University. and got a lot more out of it by doing that, because we didn't gain any advantage work-wise or freelance-wise or anything by living down in the Ogden area. However, I was able to teach the Elders Quorum. I was called to do that, and that became one of my first experiences of teaching.
Wasn't that in Clearfield, though?
No, that was in Riverdale that I first started teaching there, and then I had to got a job teaching in the church. Position, the elders in Clearfield, after we moved and bought a home there. But at that time,
Continue on with your schooling, though.
yeah, but it still blended with church. And, and school and work-wise, I did freelance a little bit at Utah State, and so I didn't have an awful lot to do to make any money, but we made some.
You did do that chemistry book?
Oh yes, there's a doctor of chemistry there at Utah State that I was able to be employed in illustrating a chemistry book for him. There's about 600 illustrations in that chemistry book. Larry Elsner, who taught at Utah State, had previously done one for this gentleman, and who lived in Hiram, and he couldn't do it anymore, so this fellow had me take over, and for a revision of the chemistry book, he got me involved in it. I used stipple, thousands of little dots, to create the molecular structures and the things that pertain to chemistry at Utah State.
Did you do another one?
And then I followed through and did a second one, but that time I thought, must be a faster way of doing it. So I turned to airbrush. And so this was done for Eintex in Pennsylvania through this doctor, this teacher, the professor. And so the airbrush thing went so much faster. I was able to go through the whole book so much better, and a lot of technical drawings, charts, and everything else were also included in that book. But what's interesting is I use a blue pencil, because blue doesn't usually photograph, and so I use the blue pencil to structure the airbrush renderings, and then I airbrushed them. Well, Eintex, back in Pennsylvania, notified me after I got these all done that they could not remove, through photography, that blue line. There must have been a little bit of red in that blue pencil line. And so I had to proceed for many, many weeks to try to diminish and alter the blue line structure that was coming through and showing in those airbrush renderings. And as I look upon that book, even now, if I were to search, I could see the evidence of that blue line not having been taken out successfully. So I learned a little bit there from that experience. But that did allow us to get a little bit of money to help us at Utah State. Can you think of anything else there that while you were, we had Michael, he was born in 1960, and we began our little family.
December 1960.
December.
Also, you've got to remember that at Utah State you were awarded the
Artist of the Year.
Artist of the Year.
Yes, I got a gold watch. I can get that gold watch fixed so that the children can fight over it when we die.
I think all the parts have been...
No. The watch itself, Grover said that, Brother Grover, what's his name? Anyway, he said he could fix it.
Oh, that's not the problem. It's little girls that have played with it.
Oh, I should not have been, Beth.
Oh, I know.
Oh,
so I don't know where it's
I had
at.
no
Anyway.
idea that happened. You cute little girls, we love you anyway.
We had...
We
we
stayed-
moved to Clearfield during that time, and that's where David. That's where we lived when we had David, and then we already had Mike, and so family-wise, we had two little boys, and then we had the opportunity to move to Oxnard, California, and but during that time, what else was taking place?
Well, you have to remember what moved us to there,
yes,
because
yes.
when we bought the home, I had finished Utah State. I had got my degree there in advertising design and illustration, and Harrison Groutidge. What was his name?
We just called him Grout.
Grout. And anyway, at Utah State was my main teacher there. And so when I graduated from Utah State, I got a job with Thiokol Chemical, which is west of Brigham City, and out on the desert, so to speak. And then we bought this home in Clearfield, a nice little home. It's brick and just a nice sized home.
3-bedroom.
3-bedroom, and so it was plush. It was really nice. Anyway, we carpooled. I carpooled to work out to Thiokol every day, and
back then the payment on that house was $119.
yeah, and we thought that was so expensive.
Yes.
And I was also still working on chemistry books a little bit while we were still in that home. And so Clearfield became another ground where our children, our boys, both of them having been born in Ogden, and it was fun to see the interaction between Michael and David. They had a lot of fun together, playing together, and Michael was very tolerant to a degree, and competitive as can be right from the start.
Let me interject right there. I can remember when Dick's brother, and I don't know how many children he had at the time, maybe a couple, but anyway, they come up there to our home in Clearfield, and Elisa, she started chasing.
Not Elisa, Lisa.
Oh, Lisa. Okay,
Yeah.
Lisa. Anyway, she started running after Mike, trying to hug him and all that kind of stuff. And he was just, 3 at that point, I think. And she would chase him. And then, because of the stress of that, he broke out in hives. And I had to give him a bath in the sink with soda and all that kind of stuff.
It was traumatic for him to have a little girl chase him all over the house. It really was. And I don't think he remembers that. I don't know. So, but that was a fun time. And then I was put in a elders presidency and had the opportunity to teach there in Clearfield with the elders and to be in the presidency of the elders. So it was a learning experience in church and starting our family, going to Thiokol Chemical, working as a designer there.
Meeting up with the Jepsons.
Yes, and while at Thiokol, Winston Jepson was one of the scientists there working for Thiokol, and he and his wife Ruth lived in Brigham City, and they had I think about 6 children at the time, 2 sets of twins. And anyway, Winston had me do some brochures for a job that he was working on separate from his work. And meanwhile, he got a job in Port Hueneme, actually, Port Hueneme, California, and for a trailer company, kind of the PR guy, and he was a promoter and turned out later to be quite a
Scoundrel.
Scoundrel. It's a good term for it. Con artist almost. Well, he was a con artist. he'd love to get money from other people to finance his weird companies and things, and this is one of his companies that I did a brochure for. Anyway, he enticed us to move down to Port Hueneme, to Oxnard area in California on the coast. And so I got a job doing all of their printing and designing and for that company, Trailwide Corporation of America. They did these trailer homes that were expandable. The first expandable, you use a crank and it becomes double wide instantly into a usable little home, double wide. And so it was a manufacturing plant, and I ran all the marketing and putting advertisements in magazines, trade magazines all over the country, and advertising through New York Times and LA Times and newspapers and everything to advertise their product. And so that was a good experience. It was different and new for me. And so I gained some experiences doing that as their marketing whatever. And at the same time got to know some really wonderful people in that area. One of them became my agent, a printer, Chuck Milam was his name, and he lived in Ventura, had one of the biggest printing firms in that whole territory. And so he started using me. He noticed that I could do things that he had someone working for him doing the brochures and logos for clients and everything, preparing things for printing. But he was a drunkard and wasn't reliable, and so Chuck Milam turned to me and I became his artist.
Chuck wasn't the drunkard. The guy.
Oh yeah, the fellow that Chuck had
working
for him was a drunkard and couldn't be relied on. Chuck was a marvelous, wonderful man, and chain smoker, and just so wonderful to me, and giving me opportunity to work. And so for a short while, I was doing that and being director of advertising there at that Trailwide Corporation. And then decided to quit there and become just a full freelance designer. And so I did illustrations and designs for Chuck and other agencies in that territory, and Winston Jepson and was part of that, not part of that experience, but I worked for him with Ruth on developing a line of things that were later to become Chartomatic of America, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But our children, we added Brenda in Oxnard. She was born in the Oxnard Hospital.
In 1966.
1966, Brenda came into our fold, and so Michael was around 6 years old, and David 3 years old, and so we had a threesome. And so that was exciting to have, Michael was in school, and so he was getting to be an old boy, and David was too young, and so we lived in another home. Well, we lived first when we went to Oxnard. We lived in an apartment. What's the name of that apartment?
I can't remember.
Yeah, we're forgetting names and things, but it was a nice apartment, and then from there it didn't suit our needs size-wise, so we rented a home in Port Hueneme, and that was a nice home and right near a park, and the boys would go over there and play in the park and just enjoy themselves.
And they would get the crawdads out of the water there.
And that would drive you batty. Yes, and so, but the children, the boys really enjoyed that area, I think, as I recall. We had some wonderful friends there. And Winston and Ruth were in our ward for a while. I don't know. Yes, they were. Of course they were. And so we spent some very formative experiences there in Oxnard. I was put into the bishopric and served with Bishop, what's his name, Beth? Started with a S.
Savage.
Savage. Bishop Savage. Wonderful, loving man. It just, oh, he's just so good. And Steve Boyce. And Steve Boyce became like family. Steve and Freddie Lou. And so we got so close to their family. And they had children that lined with our children age-wise. And so that turned out to be a marvelous friendship situation. And so that experience being in the bishopric was fantastic.
Yes.
And
do we go on to church service later? Okay.
No, you can do it now.
Oh, okay.
yeah, after Steve Savage, was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen E. Savage.
Stephen E. Savage. He was released as a bishop, and then I was appointed to become the bishop. And so I chose Brother Steve Boyce to be my counselor, and Robert Waldron. Robert Waldron was from Samaria, Malad, Idaho area. He taught school there, and then he got a job being a teacher there in Port Hueneme. And he was he didn't probably weigh more than 95 pounds. With small frame, and one of the giants I've ever known spiritually and as a man. He and his wife, Barbara, became such close friends also. And Robert Bob died later when they moved back to Malad, and they were good friends all through the years until he died, and so that was a wonderful association that we had with our counselors.
But you were a first counselor, right?
I was the first counselor with Steve Savage, right? And we'd go to stake conference over at Ventura. They had a brand new stake center, and it was wonderful.
Went to Santa Barbara for our stake conference.
Oh, that's right, Santa Barbara first, and then they finally built a place, a stake center in Ventura, and so we went there. So that was again church and family. We were growing, we were experiencing things, and gaining experience. I had made a promise with the Lord that having not gone on a mission and never did get called in, never asked to go on a mission, and so getting married to Beth was my mission. And I promised the Lord that I'd do anything that He would ask me to do. I look back on that, and He lived up to that statement that I made to Him. And I had opportunities to serve that I gained the trust of Heavenly Father, and I trusted Him. And it was just a wonderful experience of learning in the gospel, in our family, raising our family, even to the point where for a while there we had family and my work and everything right in our home. And so it was this close bonding time, wasn't it, Helen?
It was, and the thing about living down there is that it's totally different than living where we are living right now. We didn't get to know the church was our activities and all that stuff, because we did not even get to know our neighbors at all anywhere that we lived.
Yeah, we had a lot of Maori people
in our ward,
island people living in our ward. It was a big ward. We had Point Magoo Naval Base, and we had Port Hueneme, So there's 2 naval bases that came to our ward, were part of our ward, with the Maori people. It was a blend of marvelous, wonderful people. Over 700 in our ward. It was a big ward.
Mentioned too, even though grandchildren will not have remembered this, about when you were on the stand and that lady passed away.
Oh yes, on one sacrament meeting, I had opened the meeting and we had got into sacrament, and right during sacrament, a sister I had asked to speak
On
genealogy. She died right at the stand, and one of the priests at the table,
Blessing the sacrament.
he jumped up to try to revive her. He couldn't do it, but it stopped the meeting, needless to say. And that was one neat little experience that was spiritual, but eye-opening for me, that you never know what's going to happen when you go to church. And so it was, that experience of being a bishop there was really, really interesting. During that time, I continued to work on chemistry book too. So I was able to do a little of that. Freelance work was up and down. Sometimes we'd have plenty of money, other times broke. It was just, a job would come in, we'd get paid for it, we'd live off of it, and then no work would come in for a little while, and we'd almost starve.
Not really.
Not really, but it was tough for Beth to keep track of our finances when it was up and down so very, very much. Another thing that happened too, educationally, was I always wanted to go to the Art Center. It was downtown Los Angeles area on 3rd Street, in Hollywood actually. And so I enrolled in a perspective class to study under Theodore Youngkin, who is probably one of the best people I could possibly take perspective from in the entire world, let alone in the United States. And so I had the privilege of going to night school at the Art Center, and that turned out to be a turning point in my life. During the same period of time, Winston Jepson came back into our life and affected it in ways that charted a path that we followed for the next several years. And his wife Ruth is the one that developed an idea line of perpetual use charts, the first write-on, wipe-off charts in America.
Okay, we just want to back up a little bit and tell this little story. And this would be back in Riverdale, when we were living in the little apartment at Salisbury's. Was that her name?
Yes.
Salisbury Steak. Anyway, and we just had Mike, of course, and he was able to sit up in the stroller and so forth. But I wanted to get a picture of him crying. So the only way I could get a picture of him crying was I would go in the house and close the door. And then we did get him to cry, and we got a picture. But that was just one little fun incident. And as we recall certain things, we will interject them into the proceeding part.
Right.
Okay?
They'll actually be edited in, you won't even know.
Oh, that's right. You do that. So, anyway.
So now let's go back to California.
Okay.
What do I talk about here?
Well, Chartomatic while we were there.
And
Yeah, the children's experiences.
Oh, children's
So
experiences.
let's do
And
kids'
that-
experiences first. Yeah. Kids in church and then Chartomatic.
Okay. When we were living in Port Hueneme, the children had some wonderful experiences there that they can reflect back on and remember from what we're talking about right now. in the ward where I was serving in the bishopric and later as bishop. We, as I mentioned before, had Maori people there and two naval bases in our ward, and we would have some luau's and parties that were just so exciting because of the Maori people. They're party people.
There were Tongans and Samoans.
Yes.
And I don't know what else.
And they were so filled with a desire to have fun. And I remember one with family especially that just get out there and lead the way.
Tuatamis.
Yeah, Tuatamis. And they knew how to play instruments and sing and dance, and people just dropping in to see that would never believe that an LDS ward would have such hilarious and fun parties.
And one of the dances, and I can't remember what the name of the dance was, but they'd take these two long bamboo sticks, and they would clap them together and do dances in between outside, and that was a fun type to see.
But our children loved it. All the children in the ward loved that experience of seeing that hilarious fun time happen, and the food was fantastic. They'd bring food, and it was just a regular luau. So that ward was a fun ward for children and us.
Yeah, and talking with Ruth Jepson the other day, I told her now, didn't you do a dinner for the ward and you had your all on your food storage? And she said yes, and that was great. She used all things that were in her storage and cooked it for the ward.
Yeah.
It was great.
And some of the other things that the children were involved in, they had friends in the neighborhoods that we lived in, and they got involved with a lot of fun things. And I wish I could recall some of those things, but I have a hard time doing it. Can you remember some of the fun things that children were involved in, especially the boys?
Let's see. I think when Mike was 4 or 5, let's put it that way. He says 4, I don't know if it was 5. But Damas gave him a penknife and he slit his thumb a long ways. And that was dumb of us to do that. But he remembers it.
I think it was Mom that allowed that to happen. I can't remember being a part of that situation.
And then it probably was so. But also, at this point, I wanted to bring out too. They had fun. We had taken them down to the beach, and they had fun. But it was the beach right there in Oxnard. It was cold
And treacherous.
And anyway, and I myself, Dick loved the ocean, but I am a person not enjoying the ocean. Living right there with all the fog that would roll in at night, and it was just kind of eerie to me. But, and also, there wasn't a change in seasons that I loved, because I'd grown up with winter, spring, summer, and fall. But anyway, that was one thing that I did not like about that area.
This is a period of time, too, that Disneyland was just 90 miles away. And so we went down to Disneyland a number of times. And our boys just thoroughly enjoyed and ate that up, and affected their lives from then on. Our whole family, where we visited Disneyland probably 35, 40 times.
Not in that period of time.
But over the years, and I became a part of them emotionally, and it's interesting the experiences that you give to your children, how it affects them in a lot of ways. We visited museums, art, and schools, and they were with us, and I think that also gave them an idea that college could be fun, further education could be fun, and they've all pursued educational lines and trained themselves into different areas, and that's exciting to see that enthusiasm and that excitement. So our children had some wonderful experiences, fun-wise. I think they look back and they had the chance to be children. They had the opportunity to do children things without being, what would you say, crushed for stepping out of line just because they're a certain age. Maybe we gave them too much freedoms. I don't know. We didn't have them work very hard enough at times. But there are other times that they got involved real good, and they've proven since they've been grown-ups that they know how to work.
One thing that we need to mention, even though it's was back in Utah, our David, at the time, there was a field between our group of homes and the school, and it was all dry and so forth. But he lit a fire down in the field, and that was, I'm sure, quite exciting. And let's see. Okay, you go ahead now.
Well, I'm glad he didn't burn down a lot of our neighbors' homes.
Well, me too.
Because it could have happened.
And then, do you want us to bring up about the little rats?
Well, no, that's in the 70s. We're doing that next week.
Okay.
So right now, for example, maybe tell
David
a story about when Brenda was born.
Oh.
We're back in the 60s.
Okay.
So going to go get the record player and stuff.
Oh,
Like that.
okay.
Do you remember that at all, or?
I don't.
I kind of do, but I kind of don't.
Well,
I remember we would try to keep things happy amongst you guys.
When a new baby came.
When Brenda and Andrea came. Yeah.
Anyway, we were living on Jackson Street, whatever it was called, and we had made good friends of, now I can't remember their names, but when it was time for me to go to the hospital and have Brenda, then their daughter, of these good friends of ours, she came to babysit while we went to the hospital. Can you remember their names?
I don't remember the situation there.
Anyway, she was a good friend. Anyway, and so she was there to tend the kids, and of course went and had Brenda, and the doctor said that Brenda was a Gerber baby because she was so chubby and cute. Anyway, and it had become kind of a policy of Dick and I's that when a new baby would come into the family, then we would get little gifts for those older children so that they wouldn't feel sad. And when we would start paying more attention to the new little baby. But Mike reminded us that during this time,
we had purchased a phonograph.
Well, he took you with him?
One of the records that they remember so well was Puff the Magic Dragon. And what was a group that we actually went over to Ventura to watch? The 4Ds or the 3Ds? And they sang Puff the Magic Dragon and a whole bunch of other LDS primary songs that were just so good, and they were such good singers. And we all loved them. We had the big record of them, and it was listened to an awful lot in our home. I remember that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, music was introduced to them first through that means, and then later on they became introduced to piano lessons and things like that. And so their life has been enriched. Some of the children, David, he didn't follow through very well, but Andrea and Michael and Brenda did.
Well, Andrea only 3 years of music lessons.
Yeah, but she got enough
Michael
to be able to
play.
enjoy and play.
Yes, that's true. And then Mike had 10 years, and Brenda had 10 years
Right.
of piano lessons.
So there's a development of a love of music with our children, but we were not a musical family like some families are, and I look back and say, I wish we could have done more of that, and that would have been a good experience for all of our children to have been more involved in, and maybe more pressure to take lessons in different things.
I think David wishes now that he would have stuck with the piano, and I know Andrea, I think she's made the comment about she should have stayed longer with learning the piano too, but she does fine playing things on her own.
During this time, Winston Jepson came back into our lives, and they lived down near Disneyland, Placentia area, and Ruth, the brains behind almost anything that Winston ever wanted to promote, but he took all credit for it. But Ruth developed a family chart to keep track of all of their scheduling of the children's activities and their activities, and it was the first product in America for wipe-on, wipe-off abilities, and she developed that, and so Winston got in on it and had me design that, redesign that, and then I designed a full line of commercial business type charts, quite large ones, and so we had a full line of designed charts for business and for home. Even down there in Placentia, we began to have them printed and get ready to be able to sell them. And so in Los Angeles, we had them printed, and they came out really, really, really good. But we needed funding, we needed money, and Winston, with his ability to excite people to donate money to become part of a business, that's one of his talents. Anyway, he made acquaintance with people up in the Provo, Orem area in Utah, and we got a group of some families up there that donated and funded, invested. That's a better term, in Chartomatic. And so we had a manufacturing plant developed, and we had a sales force. We had an office still in Los Angeles, and set up one in New York. And so we had a sales force, meager as it was, trying to cover the United States. Wasn't that successful in doing that. But, you know, the product really flourished. The sales didn't, because that's such a hard thing to market nationwide. And so there are other people like Pentel of America out of Chicago that supplied the pens, and we continued to have them printed and manufactured. We had a lot of people working on the manufacturing line. I heard that we had all in all around 300 people involved in helping with Chartomatic. I'm not sure that's correct. It just doesn't make sense as I look back on it. But it was a big involvement and a big investment. And so we had stockholders, we had a regular corporation developed, and Chartomatic became quite a potential, where it came to the point where we attracted some big business people in this back east. One of them being the Burrow family that owned Eagle Pencil Company at that time. They had their own redwood forest section to supply wood for their pencils. And they were also involved in manufacturing the Prismacolor markers. They had a plant in New York, Dansbury, New York, that we had a chance to visit and see how these products were made. They were excited about our product line to bring it into their fold. And so for a number of months we were in negotiations with them to sell the corporation to them, and they purchased it with all its debts. So we made a little bit of money, enough for me to return to school and to start working on my Master of Fine Arts, my MFA degree at BYU. And so that allowed that to happen. During that last year, I had the privilege of being the CEO, the president of Chartomatic, and Winston fell out of favor with some of the folks there, and so I had to take over that part. But he was still part of the corporation. Anyway, we came through, and with enough money to be able to get back into school and go full time working on my master's degree.
And we were able to take did Winston round up a truck for us?
Yes, to move. Yeah, he got a truck that we moved all of our furnishings and possessions from California to Utah. And I remember that trip. There was a car that a guy was driving, and he fell asleep, and he ran.
It was during hunting season in Utah.
And he ran into the trailer we were pulling behind the truck.
Yeah.
And anyway, that happened outside of Cedar City, and so
we were already having troubles with the truck.
Yeah, it was not easy getting stuff up there.
And you children, you were being tended by Carolee, I believe.
Yeah, I don't remember the details of what we did,
remember.
but I know that just Beth and I were involved in that moving situation. But we found a home in Orem, and we purchased it for how much? Is it 119 also? 120? I think it's around $120,000. And
no, it was only 19, I think. 17? 16, that's right.
It was around $16,000.
And the payments weren't that big.
And the payment, but what a contrast! Just a few years later, how expensive these homes became. But then we set up our home in that area, and worked in the church. I was executive secretary for the stake, and had some other opportunities to do things, and so I did freelance work, designs, and worked my way doing freelance to get through school at BYU, along with what money we did have, which wasn't much.
And after they sold Chartomatic, then we had a little bit of money. So this one time we decided to pay for all the food for the ward to have a ward dinner.
Oh yeah, Beth.
And then also during this time, also during this time, I was, I think, I can't remember all of the things church-wise that I did. In California, I taught primary, and then I did Relief Society and different things like that. But when we moved to Orem, then one job I remember is that it was don't know what it was called back then, but it was the homemaking part of Relief Society. And anyway, we got to bring this in about, I was at a meeting probably Relief Society. And Dad, we had gotten bikes, and Dick had, Mike was riding on a bike, and I can't remember the children.
I think David was riding on the bike with me.
And I don't know where Brenda was, but anyway, we're going down some hills, up and down, and not me, because I was in the meeting, but anyway, Mike, I can't remember what he hit, but he went flying off the bike, and he scraped his face, got rocks in his skin and face, and so I know Dick came and got me, and we had to take him to the hospital, and he had to stay all night at the hospital, but they had to just to be sure that there wasn't any concussion or anything like that, but they had to scrub his face till it was just down to the raw skin, and because of the rocks and all that dirt and stuff that had gotten in his face. But that was just one little incident that
Little incident that is never forgotten.
Right.
Right, because that was a painful experience for Michael.
And it was hard for us. Oh, we don't want to leave him all by himself.
Yeah.
But we did.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But growing up in that area in Orem was really a wonderful time for the children. I look back and they were happy. They had good friends. And,
yeah, they all had friends.
yeah.
So,
And they made friends easy anyway.
yes.
They were fun to be around with the children of the area. So that was neat. That Chartomatic experience turned out to be a marvelous experience because I was able to work with an agency in Philadelphia and New York, and the people back there, the creative people that helped us to market the new line, was very educational, to say the least. And so the transition of being of Chartomatic and in charge of it to selling it to the Burrow family, which didn't allow other people to come into their stockholding situation. They just outright bought the corporation. And it was a blessing because we had debts and they took care of those, and we just kind of stepped back and let life go another direction. And it had a profound effect to get me back into school, to get my MFA, and that experience of going to BYU, taking classes from different teachers there. I went there to study under Alex Duveus, a Greek descendant and one of the finest designers in the country, and especially at BYU. He was just notorious for his good teaching. But he went on a leave the semester I started there, and I wasn't able to take a class from him, and so I got a MFA committee that was not involved with him in it. But I ended up getting acquaintance with him and spending a lot of time doing design work for him. He would design them, and then I would finish them up, get them ready for publishing, like Sundance for Robert Redford and others. But he was a noted designer that we'd spend a lot of hours on his front room floor talking about a design and how to improve it. And sometimes the moving of a little teeny part, 32nd of an inch long, became a critical issue in his mind. He was a perfectionist to the point of just unbelievable means. His fence, just to give you an idea, all the nails he used in his fence were such that they were only pounded into a certain length, about a half inch they were left out for a design effect. And everything was just perfect. In his home, he had concrete for one of the walls, I remember, and before it dried, he he sprayed it to expose some aggregate and rocks and created its own texture. And my, who would ever think of such a thing? He would. And so details became extremely important to him. And so when it came to a graphic design that I was working on with him, oh man, it had to be absolute perfection. And so that was a good thing for me to go through and work with a mind like him, and I had to be his hand to be able to finish his designs. But experiences like that at BYU were wonderful. Then I worked with Lauren Wheelwright, who is a noted publisher, printer in Salt Lake City.
A music person.
Music person. Lauren Wheelwright was, he's got hymns in the LDS hymn book even now. And I had a chance of working with him for a full year on a book on Mormon art, artists and art. And so I did all of the design work and bringing things together for a full school year under his direction. And it was really wonderful to work with such a sensitive man. Even spent one evening in his home where he was like stepping into a cathedral, a big organ there, and he played the organ for me, and it was just a delight to see his professionalism as a musician, but also as an administrator. He was ahead of all the art, the humanities at BYU, and so that's why he was able to be in charge of this book that was being published. And so I had a chance to publish my design work and some artwork in that book.
One little side note too, going to their house, his wife was, I guess
Duace.
Oh, yeah.
Alex Duace's wife.
Alex.
Yeah, we've been talking about Wheelwright.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But anyway, Alex Duace's wife, she was making graham crackers when we were there, and I'd never heard of anyone making graham crackers. And so that was kind of an interesting thing, because she would work a lot with wheat and all this kind of storage stuff and so forth. That's just a little side thing.
Yeah. But this is probably it at BYU until I got my MFA award finished there. And I was teaching classes in lettering and design while I was at BYU, and watercolor. I even taught watercolor there. And so I had some experiences teaching that set the stage for opportunities that were coming up. And so that BYU experience, the MFA, looking back on it, it happened at the right time. And so that's kind of an end of an era, because from then on, opportunities opened to come to Ricks College to go back home.
Now, where we were now in Orem, and that is where we had Andrea. She was born in December 19th, 1969. And anyway, and then during this time too, after she was born, I started to have a problem with my kidney, and I think what really brought it on is I was on a diet, and I ate a lot of spinach, and I understand that it has stuff in it that can cause kidney stone. But anyway, it was during this time that I did have a kidney operation, and so that they could get all the kidney stones out of there, and it ended up to be a pill bottle 3/4 full of sharp kidney stones, and in fact it was called a staghorn. whatever that means. But anyway, and I can remember I'd get a bad fever because probably infection and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my dear friend who was my partner to go visiting, teaching, and so forth. This one night she came over and she mopped our kitchen floor, and then I was just freezing so bad. I can remember having a lot of sleeping bag and blankets and everything all over me, but that didn't do any good because I had a high fever. But anyway, and that night, then that was when Dick took me into the hospital, and then we found out what was happening. So anyway, and I remember just before we have a picture of Andrea just before we were going to be leaving to go to Idaho to live. She was playing in the dirt in front of her house. She had dirt and all over her face, all over her clothes, and I just can see her how she was smiling, and she had her hands out. And anyway, so do you have anything else to add?
No, other than it completed our family. We had 2 boys. They were growing up, and now we had Brenda and Andrea, and we felt complete.
All
And-
about 3 years apart.
Mhm.
1960, 63, 66, and 69.
Right, and so that's a good timing where each child, we feel, got their just dues of affection as babies, because by the time the child is 3 years old, they're exploring the world in a way that is just a little bit different. And so we had a wonderful little family there, and Beth couldn't have any more children because of the kidney experience. And
Well, we
she could have,
probably
but
could
it would
have,
have been detrimental or risky
but
to do so.
yeah, and we'll go into that a little later.
Right. So that completed our family in numbers at that time, and life changes often, and that's what was ahead of us. Was we sell a home and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, and accepting a position at Ricks College as a teacher. That became our new experience ahead of us.